Welcome to the Humans of Hospitality podcast. I know so many of you listening to this show love your local bar, your local restaurant, maybe your local hotel, and have so many fond memories of time in hospitality businesses. This is the podcast where we get to chat to the human beings behind the scenes of that industry. Maybe the chefs or the bakers or the coffee roasters or the gin distillers or the craft brewers or the entrepreneurs, but all doing an amazing job of making sure that hospitality stays interesting and the big, dull, formulaic brands do not take over our high street. Please enjoy the show. In this week's conversation, with Easter not too far away, we are chatting to the lovely Claire Burnet from Chococo. Now, teenage memories of choosing individual mouth-watering chocolates in Belgium, France and Holland are behind Claire's jokey suggestion that she and her husband Andy leave their perfectly well-paid jobs in London and make chocolates in Dorset instead. Soon after, they converted a small hairdressing salon in Swanage into a chocolate kitchen, complete with viewing window, and a tiny shop upstairs. Yep, that's right, upstairs. It was 2002 and Chococo found itself in the vanguard of a pioneering chocolate makers, only using fresh ingredients from local producers and sourcing chocolate with a clear provenance from countries like Madagascar, Venezuela and Grenada. We'll find out why Claire and Andy use Raisetrade chocolate, and it is different to Fairtrade, and how the mantra spend a little, learn a lot has helped the couple grow their business from that tiny kitchen in Swanage to 4 buzzing chocolate houses in Hampshire, Devon and Sussex, as well as Dorset. I very much hope you enjoy this week's chocolate conversation. Claire, hello. Thank you so much for allowing me to come and have a chat. It's lovely to see you again.
It's lovely to see you, and thank you for wanting me to be part of your fantastic sounding podcast.
Thank you. It's been, I think, over 10 years, so I'm genuinely excited to come and hear what's happened in the last decade of your life, because I remember meeting you back in Swanage, I think, making chocolate with my team right in the early days of both of our businesses.
Yeah, that was the early days. We've moved on a bit since then. Yes. So we're now sitting here in our Chococo HQ, as we grandly call it, our slightly tatty unit in Wareham, where we have on the ground floor, we have our making rooms where we make all our chocolates, and now we're making gelato, which is very exciting, and our packing rooms, so they're all downstairs, and then we have our really smart offices upstairs, where we're sitting in our tiny staff room, and so this is where the magic happens here in Wareham.
I always get sat in odd places when I go and visit people. I went to an interview Jimmy's Iced Coffee. We did a podcast with him, and I think I end up in fundamentally what felt like a cupboard, but apparently he gave it some glamorous name, like a packing room or something like that.
Well, that's exactly what happens when you run a small business. When you run your own business, you don't have money to spend on the back office. All the money, the investment goes into what the customer sees. So it goes into the chocolate room, it goes into the molds, it goes into our tempering machines, it goes into the gelato, it goes into the packaging, it goes into our chocolate houses. It doesn't go into swanky offices. So that is something that's, you don't spend the money where you don't need to, because there isn't lots of money floating around.
But you have got some amazing stuff. So thank you for the tour. I've just gone around and seen the most amazing. We're just coming up to Easter, so you are massively busy.
We are pretty busy.
Are chocolate eggs everywhere. The place smells incredible. So I want to come into what you do now, but clearly a chocolatier. But to start with, I'd just love to hear the story of how these things start. So can you just take me back and just explain how did Chococo come into being all those years ago?
Yes, well, it was... Chococo is sort of set up basically by myself and my husband, Andy. We launched in October. Well, no, we didn't launch in October. We launched in December 2002 and in Swanage. And why Swanage? Why chocolate? Well, there are a number of key influences for that. The first, I think, the sort of first catalyst was actually giving birth. So I had my first child, Lily, in London back in 2000. And becoming a new mum, I became really aware, much more than I ever had before, about food and what I was feeding her and what was in processed foods. And I really suddenly started tuning in. And started worrying about things like that. And at the same time, we were living in London, but Andy wasn't very happy. He was in accountancy, and I was trying to juggle working in marketing roles with a baby, and it just wasn't really working for us. And Andy's family was from Swanage. His mother was born in Swanage, and we actually got married in Swanage back in 99. And we started saying, well, what if we left London? And what if we, set up and lived in Swanage? What would we do? And we had all sorts of brainstorming sessions in various pubs around the place. And I rather almost as a sort of slight joke said, well, chocolate, no one's doing good chocolate in the UK. And the reason I said that, this is back in, early 2000s, was my parents actually used to live in Belgium. So they moved out to Belgium in Brussels in the mid-80s when I was at university. I'm showing how old I am now. And I used to go home to see them, and we'd go to the local chocolatier and we'd buy fresh chocolates. And they were made on the premises, and they had fresh cream ganache fillings. They were made with chocolate of known provenance. You knew where the chocolate came from. They were designed to be eaten within days, not within months. And they had interesting flavors inside and fresh fillings, and we'd buy and we'd choose the chocolates. So they weren't in boxes just on a supermarket shelf. And that kind of sudden exposure before any sort of artisan chocolate shops had come over to the UK was like a revelation, if you like.
How old were you at this point? Sorry,
so I would have been sort of 19. Okay.
Right.
And we'd go to cafes and have proper chocolat shows made with chocolate. We'd go and have dame blanches with a pot of hot chocolate sauce on the side, and you poured it over the ice cream. And this completely different relationship that they had with chocolate, with food, traiteurs, just fantastic. What a revelation. And you'd go to the supermarket and there'd be walls of bars, and I vividly remember them, and they'd talk about where the cocoa beans came from. And they would have high cocoa contents and obviously no palm oil and none of the kind of, not too much sugar and things in. And I'd say that we in the UK as a nation have historically had and still have a pretty poor relationship with chocolate. So I almost jokingly said, well, actually, no one is doing chocolate in the continental style. As I remember from my Belgian, when I'm going to see the parents in Belgium, we used to go on, we go to Paris, we go to visit the chocolate shops there. They then moved to Holland. And it was just like, hello, there's a whole world of chocolate out there that isn't really being replicated here in the UK. So I think we were pretty much the first UK chocolatier to use truly fresh ingredients and local. So I was madly passionate about food miles. That was the big thing at that time. And I wanted to set up a chocolate business that was creating truly fresh chocolates, using local ingredients wherever possible, and origin chocolate. No Belgian chocolate. I'm doing the whole hands thing here with my fingers. Even though my parents had lived in Belgium, cocoa does not grow in Belgium. Okay. And yet we in the UK were stuck on Belgian chocolate. In a way that with chocolate, we don't talk about the origin of chocolate in the way that we do with so many other categories. So if we talked about coffee, you'd be able to tell me about coffee and different flavor notes from Colombia and Guatemala and Ethiopia, and you do this. We can do the same with olive oils. You can do the same with cheeses. You can do the same even with Iberico hams, and you can definitely do it with wine. All right. True. So 20, 30 years ago, everyone was terribly sophisticated in their wine choices. We had towers of black and nuns in blue. Now people are talking about different origins, different grape varieties, different processing methods, even down to different estates. And we're all actually quite sophisticated in our wine choices, almost without realizing it, and we take it for granted. And foodies can have quite a good conversation around all sorts of different categories. Chocolate is a bit of a blank. And when I talk to people about chocolate, I say, so what sort of chocolate do you like? They tend to say milk white or dark, or they'll talk to me in brands. Very rarely do they say, well, actually, I love chocolate that comes from Madagascar because it's got real fantastic, vibrant red berry fruit notes. Or actually, I was in Grenada and the chocolate from there actually was more kind of woody and earthy, but had a bit of a citrus top note. You don't have those conversations with people about chocolate.
I've not had that conversation, only with you.
And so when we started back in 2002, we really kind of turned the paradigm on its head that a box of chocolates can sit on your coffee table and last for months. So we went totally the other way, and we used truly fresh ingredients. And we hooked up with Trevor Craig, and we still work with him today. So Trevor Craig has his farm in Weymouth, just this side of, the east side of Weymouth in Osmington. And he's pretty much the only dairy farmer now left supplying direct from his farm to his customers in South Dorset. And my first meeting with Trevor was in his one of his barns with new calves, and my daughter Lily, who wasn't quite 2 at that point, eating a Marmite sandwich, running around this farm while I was talking to Trevor about whether he could supply us with cream to make fresh chocolates. And he thought I was completely bonkers, but he stuck with us, and it's a fantastic relationship. So I'm passionate about having relationships with our suppliers, whether it's chocolate globally or locally. You know, I believe in kind of direct trade, fair trade, again, in inverted commas, ethical sourcing in terms of building relationships with your suppliers. So we started working with Trevor. We still do. So we will ring his office on an evening, and Dan, his delivery driver, will deliver fresh cream and milk the following morning.
Amazing.
From the farm.
Well, we'll come into the production, but you mentioned that food miles thing was already a thing. So you just had a baby, and that was something you were already conscious of before you got into your actual own business.
Yes.
So where had that come from?
That had just come from, I think the other influence in why Chococo exists today is my mother. She was a foodie way ahead of her time. So she was feeding me in the 70s. I would go to school with a thermos flask with chicken liver risotto in it. Okay.
Wow. Lucky you.
Yes, I know. She was so ahead of every curve. And actually, my parents met in Singapore, and I was born out there. So I think my mum, even though she's from Scotland, was just fascinated by food and flavour. And I have been extraordinarily lucky as a child that my mum was just experimenting and feeding us things. So I discovered polenta. We were eating paellas and polenta and blinis, you know, before anybody had kind of tuned into them as trade, you know, food trends and crazes. And I don't know where my mum picked these things up, but she was sort of like by osmosis, she'd kind of discover these things and experiment. So I take all my passion for food and flavour from her, and care about where things come from. And yes, I've worked for big companies where, not in the food industry, where you don't really worry about where the kind of composite ingredients come from. I wanted to set a business up where it wasn't a weasel. Because there are businesses out there that would give you the impression that they've made everything. Yeah, but they haven't. They've outsourced the making part. They're just a marketing front. Yeah. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not playing any games here. So when we say we made them, we did. So we were real people making real chocolates in a real place. And that, keep it real, is a mantra that has stuck with us ever since.
I think it's key now, and I think that authenticity is it's so easy to see when people aren't doing that now. It's frustrating, and we'll probably come onto this, and the big brands kind of, you know, sort of jump on the bandwagon of
absolutely.
it. But actually, if you do a bit of research because of the internet and social, and you can generally find out a lot more about big brands than you used to be able to do, Ben, and we'll come back to that. But just a matter of interest, what was your career at this time, before you actually opened? What were you doing for a living?
So before I was a marketeer, and for my sins...
You weren't telling those lies.
No, well, for my sins, I've done the big company thing. I started at Shell. I don't know why, but I did. Then I went to Procter & Gamble, which taught me lots of things about marketing, and I learned some things about innovation. You know, very much the sort of mantra there was innovate or die. And you can't set up a business with one idea and expect it to survive long term. You have to keep innovating. You have to keep it fresh, literally. We're all about fresh chocolates. And so we expand that fresh concept into fresh chocolates, fresh flavours, fresh, everything is fresh, exciting, you know. I'm going to start singing, burst into song. So I think that's a Kid Creole and the Coconut song, isn't it? She's fresh, exciting. And that's what we try and do. So I learned some things, and don't compromise. And for all its faults, you know, the one thing that large company did was they did care about the quality of what they did. And so I refused to compromise on the quality. The quality of our chocolates now is way better than it was when we started 16 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's often the way. It's the same in my business, you know, better chefs, better knowledge, better sourcing, better contacts with suppliers and all that kind of stuff. So you're in the pub, you think, right, chocolate, so you mention it, you say yes. So how do you turn that into reality?
So Andy's an accountant, and he's like, chocolate? And I'm like, well, like, no one's. And then as I said it, I'm thinking, no one's doing fresh chocolates in this country. No one is making chocolates on site and showing, you know, so that you can't watch them being made. No one is using local ingredients. No one is using fresh cream. No one is sort of saying you need to eat these within a couple of weeks, because the mantra then was to extend shelf life. No one is really talking about where the chocolate comes from. It's, you know, as I said, sort of stuck on this Belgian chocolate thing. So I sort of did put my marketing hat on and decided to do some research. And the more I researched, the more I thought, actually, there is a gap here. there is a gap in this market in the UK. No one is doing this. It's still a pretty big gap because it's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a reason there's a gap.
There's a reason there's a gap. And as I kind of researched it, kind of the sort of the ball started rolling and it gained momentum. And Andy was brilliant. He was really supportive and he was like, okay, well, let's explore this. And he put together the business model and I was putting together all the ideas and just went super crazy on sort of the creative ideas of what we could do. Started to sort of talk to people in the industry. It's quite a small, like most industries, it's quite a small industry at the sort of the premium end, and came across a company that does a lot of supplies, a lot of chocolate ingredients and packaging, and it's still Keeling. I'll mention them. They're a really good resource, especially for people who are starting out. And so I rang them up, and obviously the industry then was it's exploded since then. We're talking at the turn of the century, and what a different world we live in now. But I rang them up and spoke to a very nice lady, and I sort of just was exploring this. And I said, I haven't made a single chocolate in anger yet. Domestically have, and actually back to my mum, we used to make chocolates at Christmas time and lots of chocolate treats and chocolate biscuit cakes. And some of those flavours are in Chococo today. So I said, I haven't made a single chocolate in anger. I've been buying books, I've been experimenting, and there weren't any courses. Now there are lots of chocolate courses you could go on. In those days, there was nothing unless you did a full patisserie course, of which chocolate then would be part. And I was like, I don't have time. I just want to do the chocolate part. And they mentioned a chap who was based up north, Andrew Thwaite, who was doing training on the side. So I got in touch with him and he said, yes, I'll train you too. So we went up, hilarious, with my very long list. And I had a notebook full of questions and ideas. And so basically we made chocolates by day, and at night we go to the pub and I'd just bombard poor Andrew with questions. And at the end, we were with him for about a week. And at the end of it, he said, I think you two will be all right. And I said, why is that? He said, I've never had anybody ask me so many questions. And bless him, his chocolate career has evolved and changed over the years, but we keep in touch. And I remember we met up with him at a chocolate show in Belgium a few years later, and we gave him a box of our chocolates, and he was so proud that we've won awards and things as well. But at the time, I was very much, he would talk about, you could buy truffle spheres, to fill, and you could buy sort of ready-made ganache fillings and you can flavour them. And I went, no, not doing any of that.
Do it the hard way.
I'm doing it the hard way. And he was like, okay, because no one was doing that.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to buy this chocolate from here that's sort of premium, but still Belgian, you don't know where it's come from. I'm only going to buy chocolate that's come from Venezuela. Okay. It was a real eye-opener for him. We were coming from it from a very different place to anyone that he'd trained before. So we bought a hairdresser's in a back street in Swanage.
Obviously, next step.
Obviously,
I'm
as
sure
you
that was
do.
on his list when you asked the question.
Yes.
Where should we start?
Where should we start? So
in Swanage.
Why Swanage? Because we'd got married there and we thought, right, well, we'll set up the business there. Not sure Swanage is ready for us. So our business model, hilariously, initially was we're having a kitchen. We had a little shop upstairs. Now, how bonkers is that to put your shop upstairs? No visibility. But we didn't think it would be that popular. And we thought we'd have to build a business by going out to shows, to events, building a web-based business, which obviously the web then was early days as well in terms of e-commerce. So we were a bit ahead of the curves on all those kind of fronts. But how wrong we were in terms of Swanage's propensity to want to eat fine chocolate. So when we bought this hairdressers, and the lady retired and had run this hairdressers for goodness knows how many years. And she literally just locked the door. So we got the keys, opened the door, and all the hairdressing kit was still there. And it was 1960s, brilliant stuff. But we were like, well, we can't throw this out. And some local friends said, well, ring up a set design company and send them some pictures and they'll probably buy it off you. So that was our first entrepreneurial thing we did. We did that, and this guy arrived in a van, gave us some money, cash-type money, that went in a pot as an emergency fund, took away all the amazing old-fashioned hairdryer things, which have probably appeared on TV shows ever since. Yeah. So that cleared out the space. But our budget was tiny. And all of it was spent on setting up the chocolate kitchen. And we deliberately, it was a little one up and down unit. So we wanted to put the kitchen on the ground floor. and we put a little internal glass window, so a little tiny foyer, so people could watch us making. And it was all about the chocolate being made. And it was, again, back to this keep it real, show people that we're real people making this here in this space, 200 square foot, tiny space. And then we made customers walk up the stairs, which probably wasn't the best idea. And we started being open only like 3 afternoons a week. And Lily wasn't quite 2. And that was a bit of a shock coming out of London. Childcare didn't really exist. And we'd been very lucky in London with nurseries to choose from within walking distance of our flat. So that was a bit of an eye-opener. But we found a lovely lady, Sue, who became our childminder. Sue then came to join us and helped pack, became one of our packing ladies over time. Then her daughter Emma joined us a few years ago, and now Emma's our packing team leader, who you met earlier, and she's getting engaged to Chris, our operations manager. Nice. So we've got our first Chococo wedding, and all due to us meeting Sue as our childminder when Lily wasn't quite 2. So I would drop Lily off. How it worked originally was I would go in early doors, like 6 a.m, and make the ganaches. So a ganache is the blend of cream, Trevor's cream, and whichever chocolate we were working with, and then whatever natural flavors to create the centers of the chocolate. But when you make a ganache, you're adding hot liquid to chocolate. So it's too warm to work with for a while. But you have to make them first thing so they can then cool, then they're ready to pipe and work with to make into truffles or molded chocolates. So Andy would take Lily to the childminder. Then we'd work together on making the truffles and chocolates. If a customer came in, I'd run upstairs to the shop, serve them, run back downstairs again. And then I'd go and pick up Lily from the childminder. And we realised pretty quickly that you can't make and pack and serve and build a business with just 2 people when you're making by hand. So handmade needs people. And we touched on it earlier, and it's one of those words that people hear, but they don't understand. And we didn't understand ourselves. Be honest, when we started, we were really quite naive about how much we could do and how much time things would take. Vertical learning curve. And we didn't allow enough space for packing at all. We didn't have any space for packing. And packing needs flat surfaces, because when you're putting chocolates in boxes, you need to get the chocolates out to be able to put them into boxes. And that first, we opened on the 5th of December. Interesting time of year.
Busy.
So we kind of really hit the ground running and realised that the people of Swanage were like knocking, banging the door down, wanting to try our chocolates. And we'd sent it wasn't pre-email. We'd sent a piece of paper with a little welcome to the freshest chocolate company in the UK to everybody we knew in our address book. And I'm sure lots of friends were like, oh my God, what have they done? Oh dear, Claire and Andy, what do you know about making chocolates? Well, let's buy a box and,
be nice.
Be nice.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's Christmas.
What's the worst that can happen? So we got a total of 175 orders for boxes to be posted out.
Wow.
I'll never forget it.
Yeah.
And we realised that we were so focused on making the chocolates to put in these boxes and running up the stairs to serve the customers that came in that I hadn't allowed enough time to pack them before the last posting date before Christmas. So I rang my sister, who's slightly younger than me, still living in London, no kids, and went, help! And she drove down. She arrived at 9:00 at night, and we packed overnight because we had to clear all the surfaces in our tiny kitchen because we didn't really have anywhere to pack these chocolates. We packed these 175 boxes overnight. We finished at 4, went to bed for a couple of hours, went back in at 7, and then put them in an outer box, got them to the post office in time. Massive learning for me that you need people. So over the course of that first year, we started to employ people to help us make, which would free. So Andy became the main maker relatively early on. And hilariously, when I'm going back to our training with Andrew up north, Andy was very much okay, you're in charge of all of this. I'm just here to make sure that you're doing the right thing and that financially this works. But when we were doing our initial training with Andrew, obviously Andrew was getting us to do everything. So we were tempering chocolate and piping truffles. And Andy is a biochemist by training in terms of his university degree. And he suddenly got into the science of chocolate. And he kind of went, wow. And he loves the whole science, the whole tempering. He can bore you for hours.
There's another podcast there,
the crystalline structure of chocolate and the correct crystalline structure in order to have properly tempered chocolate, because it's very easy to get wrong, and most people do. And he was also brilliant at piping. way better than me. Hilariously, he would have never have known. It's a skill that he would have gone through life not knowing if we hadn't have been there with me saying, let's set up a chocolate business. So very quickly, once we'd got going on the making, so when we first started, we just had a small bain-marie and we were hand tempering every batch. So to hand temper, you basically melt the chocolate, but it's at a very kind of kitchen logic level. I'm not going to bore you for hours, but it's too hot as you melt it. So you have to cool it down at sort of simplest level. And the traditional artisan way of doing that is on a marble slab. And we didn't have marble tops on the units. So we were trying to think, right, what can we do to get a cost-efficient marble slab? And it was my mum's suggestion. She said, talk to a monumental mason. So I did. He was tickle pink that it was for tempering chocolate and not to be used as a headstone. And we still have it today. And so we were basically hand tempering every batch, and you can do up to about 5 kilos at a time. And then when you fill the molds with chocolate, you have to rattle them to get any air holes out. So we were rattling them on the sides of the units, probably driving the little office next door, little local newspaper bonkers. But it's a pretty inefficient way if you're going to grow to make chocolates in bulk that way. So pretty early on, we got some little units which they don't temper for you. You still have to temper the units, but they hold the chocolate at the right temperature for longer. But they became very quickly Andy's machines. They weren't mine, they were his. He was in charge.
Once you can plug it in, it's a man's world, isn't
it?
It's like,
absolutely.
Some technology involved.
Exactly. There was like, stand back. These are mine. So I became very much on the product development, the flavors. So I'm the flavor queen, and he was the executor. So he would make them, I would develop them. And we started to, sort of bring in and employ a few more people to help on the making side, which allowed us to open and then, so I was more on the shop side. We were opening more days of the week. Hurrah! But we still didn't open on Sundays. We were trying to sort of ensure a bit of work-life balance. And that was sort of pre-Sunday opening anyway. And our little shop just went from opening a few afternoons a week to 6 days a week. We started off, we didn't even have a till. It was a calculator and a kitty box. That's how basic it was. And our original shop, we had spent our money on setting up the kitchen. But even then, our budget was really tight. And something I learned at Procter & Gamble, actually, ironically, which was to spend a little and learn a lot. And that's how they used to do a lot of testing. So I kind of held that kind of principle in mind. And we got to know our environmental health officer. And before we bought any kit, we got him into the space that we wanted to turn into our chocolate kitchen and said, right, what do we need to do to make you happy that this is going to be environmentally friendly and hygienic for you? So he gave us some top tips. And then I found that IKEA, bless them, sorry, brand name, at that time was selling steel-framed kitchen cabinets with plastic fronted doors that were really easy to clean, that were sliding. We showed these in the brochure to him, to our environmental health officer, and said, would these be acceptable to you? Because they were a lot cheaper than commercial stainless steel cabinets or units and, tables. And he went, yes. So we kitted out our kitchen with a famous Swedish brand.
Yeah, no, it's a good way of doing it.
And it allowed us to be able to sort of focus on it. Meant we could move into chocolate machines a little bit more quickly. And also, it also was a bit like, well, if this doesn't work at all, we haven't spent thousands kitting out a swanky kitchen for this not to work. And we always had in the back of our mind, well, if it doesn't work, at the worst, we can swallow our pride and get corporate jobs in Poole or Bournemouth, Yeah. But over time, you become completely unemployable. So it's never going to happen. And it just, the roller coaster, because I think we started in December, we sent out our 175 boxes. I think our friends were quite pleasantly surprised that actually they were quite edible. And it just sort of, the roller coaster just sort of grew and grew. It just happened that we were just running to keep up. From there on, we didn't stop to breathe.
And how quickly did that growth? So I remember that time and seeing your name and some great branding. And Swanage is, for those people who don't know Swanage is a tiny little seaside town that you would think is, quiet in the winter. Yes, you get tourists in the summer, but you'd think it would be challenging. But very quickly, you seem to grow to the point, and I know you ended up, it was Harvey Nichols, I think, and Liberty. Yeah. What was the time frame from going from that then to starting to supply?
To supply some of the bigger retailers. Well, I put that down to actually Lydia Slater. I thank her highly because the summer after we opened, so summer 2003, we'd been picked up a little bit by some of the local radio stations and local newspapers that were like, oh, hello, what are this mad couple up to in Swanage? And we'd made life quite hard for ourselves because we're not even on the main streets such as it is in Swanage. We're tucked away in this little alleyway area. So you've got to kind of work a bit to find us. And I had started sending out boxes of chocolates to some of the food writers for the national press. But I did it in the summer. Daft idea. But one of the people I sent a box to was Lydia Slater, who at the time was writing for one of the Sunday papers. And she had a food column and a food page. And she was actually on holiday. And this box had got eaten by her colleagues and they left it on her desk with a post-it note saying, these were delicious, suggest you ring them up. Brilliant. So I had a call from Lydia, and at the time she was kind of one of the main food writers. And she said, look, I've got an empty box of your chocolates on my desk. Can you send me some more? And I'm like, oh! So of course we did. And bless her, she put us into the paper in that October and stayed in touch with us and was just a real supporter because she completely got what we were doing. And I still remember one of the lines she used was, the purity makes the flavours sing. And this, she was just, and the press in general were just fascinated by us making truly fresh chocolates, but also working with origin chocolate, talking about where the chocolate comes from. So when we first launched, it was just Venezuela. And now we work with chocolate from Venezuela and Madagascar and Colombia. And, you know, and it's kind of grown over time, obviously. But that sense of provenance, again, was no one was really talking about it. No one was talking about using local ingredients. No one was talking about provenance. It's now everyone does, but we were doing that right from 2002. So I always say it's part of the DNA of Chococo. I was kind of ahead of that particular curve. And now, of course, it's deeply trendy. And sometimes I think people think we're just doing it because it's trendy, but I'm like, no, we've done it ever since we started. So we started getting a bit of press coverage. And again, we got a Christmas hamper piece. That's right. The journalist rang up saying, what Christmas hampers are you doing? And I went, we're not yet. We're not. Give me a day or so and I'll come up with one. So I ran around, found a box, created a hamper, sent it off to them. And blow me, the coverage comes out and there's us with all sorts of very famous brands, not all chocolate, obviously, different sorts of hampers. But it's our picture, takes up the whole page. And that Liberty was on that, and we got a phone call. Who are you? You know, so it's like, okay. So a lot of the initial premium stores that we started supplying actually they came to us, which was very exciting. Yeah, incredible. And at the time, I wasn't sure we were able to supply them because we make fresh. They don't want a fresh product that's got a 2-week shelf life. They want a product that can sit on shelf for like 6 months. And over time, we've developed a wider range of caramels and other flavors that do that by definition. But in those days, we didn't really. So the range that we could offer, the likes of Liberty and Harvey Nichols and Harrods and things, was often very seasonal. So Easter eggs, obviously, we can. And at Christmas, we'll do things that are sort of Christmas seasonal shapes and things. And over time, the range we can offer them in boxes has improved.
I'm going to ask a silly question here and show my name to it. Is that presumably the ganaches?
The ganaches with the fresh cream.
You can't sell, but if they're encased in something...
Even then, because we're not adding any adds or preserves, we never have and never will, right. Our fresh chocolates, so the chocolates you got on this plate that's sitting between us.
This teasing me, like about 8 inches from my nose, and I keep thinking, I'm going to just eat one in a minute.
A couple of them have got caramels in, so they will last several months. Others have got a fresh cream ganache, and we don't add any preservatives to it. So you will see chocolates on supermarket shelves that will talk about being a cream truffle or a cream chocolate. And actually, if you turn the back over, there's all sorts of ingredients in there that are extending shelf life. And one of the most common is the more sugar you add, the longer the shelf life. The more sugar, the more alcohol. It'll basically kill the bugs. But it completely destroys the flavour, destroys the mouthfeel, and destroys the purity of the taste. And you will end up with a sort of chemically finish on the palate. So we don't do that. Never done that. It'd be a lot easier if we did.
So how do you get around it?
We don't. Oh. So we don't sell our fresh chocolates to retailers. They don't get them. Okay. The only way you can get our fresh chocolates, and they're the ones that have won most of the awards, and I think we're at 82 now, but we're going to stop counting at some point, but is to buy direct from us. Right. Because we cannot supply Harvey next with, you've got a Concord coffee on there with Rupert's cold brew Conker. Wow, you've got a blackcurrant there with British cassis in. You've got a cabin pressure gin, and that's distilled in Horsham, which is where one of our chocolate houses in. Oh, and there's a lot of gin on this plate. You've got a twisted nose gin.
Claire is pointing at chocolates. You can't see that. Claire is pointing at chocolates, and I'm salivating about it. But go on, keep going. So working with,
and that actually hilariously is the best, I think the part of the business that I love the most is the joy of working with other local producers. Because they love what they do. They're as passionate about their gin or their bees or their jams or their herbs, whatever it is, or their blue cheese, you name it, their watercress, as we are about chocolate.
Massively.
And what's lovely is when you take Emily's blue Vinny cheese and you say, right, we're going to put blue Vinny into a chocolate. And she's like, okay, she's up for it. And we create a chocolate with white chocolate, blue Vinny cheese, chopped cranberries, put it in a dark shell, and it works. It's a Marmite in the sense of you either love it or hate it. But those that love it go, best thing you guys have ever made. And it's fun. And you create something very unique and very special. And if another chocolatier does a blue cheese chocolate that's blue cheese local to their area, then of course that's going to be equally unique. And that's what I love, is that a combination of the chocolate we work with, Trevor's cream, and the local ingredients just create something that is beautifully unique. It's fresh. It's designed to be indulged and enjoyed and eaten fresh. But you focus on it. You have to think about it in a different way. And I think a lot of people think of chocolate as something that you eat while you're driving, while you're watching TV. They don't focus on it in the way they might a fine wine or a cheese board. And they should.
Subconscious eating, yeah.
Yeah. They deserve the work and the craftsmanship and the effort to balance the flavours. The work that's gone in deserves a bit of focus.
Yeah, and this is the point of this podcast, I suppose, is that it's such a privilege to represent all of those human beings. So many products that we eat, and it's the same when people come into my restaurant sometimes and they order some food and they're chatting to their friends and they've got no idea that there might be 15 or 20 different suppliers behind that dish that they've eaten, and how hard I give the example of anything that comes in bread, and you're like, well, look, that baker has never taken his kids to school because he's up at 4 o'clock every morning and he's his bakery, and you don't realise the compromises that guy is making just for his element of the product. And it's so humbling really to represent all of these different brands. I'm meeting Blue Vinny, Emily, is it? Yes. Blue Vinny. I'm meeting her to do a podcast in a couple of weeks' time, and yeah, what a privilege it is to kind of chat to all these people and bring all these brands and use them in different ways and represent them, because so often we in the restaurant trade, we're just the middleman really between all of these incredibly passionate producers and what we do. So all of a sudden, or over a period of chaos, you're in Harvey Nichols. How do you expand then quickly?
But just for anybody who's listening thinking, oh, wow, you're never going to get rich supplying premium department stores. Can I just put that out there now?
It's presumably a branding opportunity.
It's lovely, yes, it's lovely PR, and it's fab for the team and it's fab for the brand exposure. But, they don't order very much.
Well, it's probably the perfect segue, actually, because my next question was going to be, your then big shift seemed to be you actually started to open your own chocolate
Absolutely.
houses. So presumably that was a result of that. You realised that the route to market
not even. I think I've always been passionate about building a direct relationship with our customers. I get the most joy out of developing flavours with local producers and then selling them in our Swanage shop and having that direct conversation with our Swanage customers. And Swanage customers would come in and they'd kind of do a double take. They'd walk in and go, am I still in Swanage, or have I just walked into Marylebone High Street? Which was quite fun, and people would come in and go, "Is this a chain? Is this a franchise?" And I'm like, "No, this is just us. We're just here." So we opened in 2002, and then we managed to secure a bit more space literally on the other side of the alleyway in 2005. So we were able to move the kitchen, hurrah, from the ground floor across the road to another ground floor with another window so you could watch, which meant we could move the shop downstairs. Hurrah, hurrah. So at least by 2005, we were a bit more visible. And then we'd also secured a bit of space upstairs. We were good at knocking holes in walls upstairs and sort of next door to create a sort of packing room. And over time, our mail order business started to grow. Yeah. So as our website started to get a bit more sophisticated and we were getting a lot of press coverage, especially Christmas, the Christmas volumes and Easter, the whole development of sending chocolates online, which again, direct from us to our customers. And we have customers all over the UK, and there's much hilarity when they're sending them off to friends in France and Belgium and things. So that's always tickled us. And so that direct to customer business was sort of growing, and we were getting fantastic feedback from our customers who are eating our fresh chocolates, which you'll never get when you're just another brand on a shelf, however posh the shop. Which is removed from the experience. Because I think with us, it's about an experience. Chococo is more than just buying chocolates that you give to someone. It's you come in, you choose them. So in our shop, we got an elderly, and it's still going. It was secondhand when we got it, and it's still going strong. A classic chocolate display cabinet. Put all the loose chocolates into that. Boxes on top, 3 sizes of box, and they are empty. And the idea is you come in and you choose what you want to put in the box. If you want all the same, you can do that. If you want all milk chocolate, you can do that. If you want dark, you can do that. If you want all white, you can't do that because we don't do much with white chocolate. But you can have boozy ones, nutty ones, soft ones, and that for me is very much what I remember from the continent.
Absolutely, yeah.
Where they're made fresh and you choose. And it's a very personal, emotional engagement and experience, and you can create a completely unique gift. And so what we do is the customer chooses, and you put them all on a little plate, and then you kind of go, right, how do we make this look beautiful? Because you eat with your eyes. So you then kind of put them all in the box, and very importantly, you show the customer the open box before you finish it off and put the lid on, and they'll go, wow. And you say, you chose those. And we put a little menu in, because in some places, there are some chocolate companies, the more you pay, the less you know about what's in there. I've never understood that logic. So we put a little menu in of little pictures, and there's little descriptions about what they are and whether they're dairy-free, or what they've got in them, whether they've got alcohol in, and all the rest of it. And you put the lid on, and we talk about the 3 wows or the 3 oohs of Chococo. And the first ooh is you've got this really vibrant, happy, joyful box, because we went with, the sensible person would have said, let's go very kind of keep it simple, have like 1 or 2 colours in this brand. No, we've gone with this multicolored brand.
The printers must love you. It's never,
absolutely.
It's never
it's a joy.
It's a joy.
It's a joy. Because every print is different as well, and how they interpret colour. But actually, the first award we won was an FAB, Food and Beverage Award, for packaging, hilariously, and we were up against Walker's Crisps or something. And we were this minute micro brand, but we were very lucky, and serendipity is a wonderful thing. We were, obviously exploring before we made a single chocolate in anger. When we were doing our research for how to make them and what kit we needed and where to set up in Swanage, a local friend said, oh, you must talk to my friend Karen. She runs a packaging design company. And she was based in London, but I had a holiday house locally. And I went to talk to her with my 1-page brief about the concept of the brand. That's a bit of Procter & Gamble training for you. And she, within 10 minutes, said, stop. And I went, oh, do you want me to leave? And she said, no, I want to work with you, but I don't want you to go and do something rubbish to start with. And I said, I can't afford you. She said, don't worry, we'll work that out. And bless her, she was a massive supporter. And we basically were a bit of a pro bono, but we would send them chocolates for whoever they wanted to charm. So it was brilliant. And she took everything that I wanted to do and all the energy and the excitement I had about using local ingredients and working with origin chocolate and making it fresh and doing what no one was doing in the UK. And she interpreted all of that into this fantastic, colourful squares brand. But every single box has a little white square. And that's really important, because that's the purity. That's the fact that we don't compromise. So we may be joyful and colourful and vibrant, and not like a normal premium chocolate shop, which can be a little bit jewelry, takes it very seriously. A lot of, some of the really premium guys take themselves very seriously, and you're a little bit like, I feel like I'm not worthy, and I'm in the chocolate industry.
You know what you're talking about.
And we were completely diametrically opposite to that. So we described ourselves as, actually, our packaging was being category busting, because at that point everything was very brown and blacks and purples and we were like, no, and we're colour. So there you see a lot more colour now in chocolate packaging. So that's another thing that I think we kind of paved the way for.
Well, I said it to you when we walked around earlier, didn't we? I saw the box, and straight away, and even from 10 years ago, I was like, wow, your branding, it may have been tweaked slightly, but it still pops off the shelf. It's still really cheerful, but it's also got a real, kind of what's the word, class and sort of, to it. So I love it.
I hope so.
It's done really well.
And it did make life like slightly complex in terms of, when we're doing packaging, and packaging and printing is one of the biggest challenges of a small business. If you want to be unique, keeping the packaging costs down
a lot of money.
Is horrific.
But going back to, so you just explained, you open these because it's quite a big jump from going from production of chocolates and packaging, send them off in the post and people coming in. So hospitality, when you start selling hot chocolates and coffee and actually running cafes. So that kind of evolved,
because for me, going back to those Belgian experiences, for me, chocolate, I really wanted to create, the vision was, it's not just a shop, but it was somewhere where you could enjoy chocolate in all its forms. So whether you eat it or drink it or pour it over ice cream. And the drinking and pouring over ice cream bit was the bit that was missing. And, I've always had a bit of a thing for ice cream and ice cream parlours. And our shop was too small. Now that 200, obviously it was 200 square foot. Luckily in 2009, the next door unit came up for rent. So we grabbed it, knocked another hole in the wall, and that became our first little tiny chocolate cafe. Another 200 square foot space, minute, but it allowed us to learn, to spend a little, learn a lot. So out of that tiny space, we started doing hot chocolates, and but not everybody will want to drink a hot chocolate. So we always support local. So it was the obvious thing to support local coffee producer. So we work with Ben of Bean Press Coffee, and we use his coffee in one of the chocolates and now in our new gelato. So, it's nice. All keeps the circle going. And Dorset tea. And we Clipper, because I don't think Dorset tea even existed back then. So it was Clipper to start with and Dorset and everything. So working with local suppliers. And so that allowed us to kind of complete the concept, if you like. And we've kind of tested it in Swanage, and Swanage is our mothership. But at the same time, while all that was going on, we were really running out of space. So our little tiny cottage industry with not enough flat surfaces, really bad access in terms of down to right-hand bends into this back alleyway. You can't get vans in to kind of do any big deliveries. And it was just becoming really difficult. And at that point, we were also supplying John Lewis, albeit with seasonal products, a lot of Easter eggs and Christmas things. But their volumes were actually getting quite big. And out of that tiny space we had, it just wasn't practical. And we were at Christmas time getting to a point where we were actually closing our order book online earlier than we should have been, because we just didn't have the capacity. And we were working till midnight. We were taking over the arts club across the road to dispatch everything from, and the inefficiencies of making in one space, walking across the alleyway, taking it upstairs, to pack it in another space, take it back downstairs, walk across the alleyway, through another door, up another set of stairs to dispatch it was just bonkers. So we started looking around for units that were bigger. And there was nothing in Swanage. They have built an industrial estate since, but it was just a concept at that point. And it took us ages because we were determined to find a unit that was still in the local area, that we could keep all our staff and we could keep all our suppliers, so Trevor could deliver and everything. And it took a while. There's not a lot of units around here, but finally we found the space that we're sitting in now, and that was in 2010. And that gave us the capacity. Suddenly we had space to have deliveries, to be able to store packaging, a proper production space. We make everything the same way, we just have more tables. And we still got the same machines. Yeah. They're exactly the same machines are in there now, but we've just got more space to work. And on the packing side, a nice big long room with lots of tables, and then we can also dispatch in the same room. And that just sort of transformed our lives. It meant then we had capacity, because until that point, everyone said, oh, you should open more chocolate shops, and we're like, love to, can't, don't have the space. But in order to do that, we had to take out a loan with the bank, and the bank at that point was very supportive. And then the credit crunch happened, and they stayed supportive until we got into here. And then they stopped being quite so supportive. And it was kind of when we got here, we suddenly had lots of capacity. Yes, we were supplying John Lewis, but the margins you make on supplying even a business like that is not great. And we really wanted to open more of our own chocolate houses, which we call them chocolate houses because it's not just a shop. It's where you come and you can buy, you eat, you can sit down, you can drink, all the rest of it. Presumably. Learn, absolutely. Yes, we now run events and things in our chocolate houses. So that kind of whole concept, that desire to take Chococo to more people, our customers were asking for it, was just really strong. But the bank was just like, nah, not interested.
2010, there was no money. I remember it well.
Yeah. So we struggled on, and we then took the bull by the horns, whatever the right phrase is, and we started looking for some local angels to help us roll out the idea of a Chococo in a more normal town. Love Swanage, but it's not normal. And we were very lucky. We've got 3 fantastic investors on board, two of whom have got really good retail and hospitality experience. And, they've put small amounts in to help us. It's not like, well done, you guys, ride off into the sunset. It's not like that at all. But it's also fantastic for Andy and me. We've now got some mentors because it's quite lonely. It's very lonely when you're trying to make all the decisions and do the right thing and be a product development department, a strategic growth department, PR, IT, HR. We could have a whole session on that alone, couldn't we?
Certainly could.
But, when you come out of a big company, as we both did, I think the benefits of that was it gave us some structure and how to hopefully look after people and train them and develop people. But what you then realise is you're used to in a big company there's a finance department, there's an IT department, there's a legal department, and all those experts to support you. And suddenly you've got to be all of those things. So actually getting on board, because some folks say, we'll never get investment, do it. Oh, and I'm like, no. Actually, get some help, get some people who know what they're doing, who can guide you and stop you making daft decisions. And when you get tired, they're there going, you're on the right lines, keep going, or I wouldn't do that for you.
There's, most people have been through a certain amount of learning themselves. There's no point every time reinventing the wheel,
absolutely.
Using that knowledge.
Yeah.
And I think that mentorship is such an important message, all the way through, right from the early stages. You've got to be careful not to listen to the naysayers and the people that just say it's impossible. But finding...
You've got to find right people that get you.
Yeah.
And you bond. And, we've obviously worked with mentors and things over the years, and sometimes it really works. And then other times, no, they're different song sheet. And I think for me as a woman as well, there's another dimension. In the early days, you'd get folk calling up, I'd like to speak to the owner of the business. And I'd say, speaking, and they'd put the phone down. It's like, And I think in a small town like Swanage, there's not a big network of people going through similar experiences. So it's better now. There are more networking groups and things out there, but I have conducted a bit of a social experiment on my kids. Lily was 2 when we started, and then I had Max in 2005. And I was back at work 6 weeks, full time, 6 weeks later. Okay, Max came with me, but that's all he's known is me as a working mum for the whole of his life. So far, so good. I think they're pretty stable, but it's hard. And when folk ask me about setting up businesses and stuff, I say, have you got a support network if you're a mum? Because don't try and do this on your own because you will just exhaust yourself. But anyway, going off piste. Bad habit of mine. Bad habit.
Ask you, do you think the kids will end up being entrepreneurial? Are they already showing signs as a matter of interest? Because I find it fascinating, the meetings that my kids have come to, the times I remember being in the New Forest cycling with my kids, and we were in the process of negotiations to finish off a restaurant.
Yeah.
We were having some problems with the EHO and the council kind of regulators. And I remember trying to find a signal. It was really important. We were we're 2 weeks from opening, and I'm trying to find a hill that I can stand on the phone. And I'm probably a little bit aggravated by the hassle that's being called, and all they can hear me is me ranting. And I remember them sort of asking me later on afterwards and saying, why are the council stupid, Daddy? And I was, oh my goodness, the things you're being exposed to. I said, they're not actually stupid. Yeah. There was a situation that was stupid. But I think, it's going to be fascinating to see all this stuff, especially at that age, is sinking into their subconscious.
They definitely understand the work ethic. They understand what it takes, that you have to work. And I do worry. I make a big effort to make sure that Christmas isn't spoilt for them, because Christmas for us actually is obviously our busiest time. And the danger is by the time we get there, we're like chewed string, as my dad would say. So it's making time to make it special. But it's interesting, daughter Lily, actually, I'm not sure about entrepreneurial, but it's made her I think she's very determined and she knows herself. So I think she's seen her mum kind of going for it and leading the way. And, she's going to be a marine scientist. She's out there to get the plastics out of the ocean, save the world. And, and it's, perfect. So I think that she's turned into somebody who's going to be quite a strong woman, I hope. Whereas Max, hilarious. I'd never forget when he was quite young, toddler, just learning to talk. And he was in his buggy outside and we were chatting, and I think he was with my mum or something. And he suddenly said, Mummy, cutmers. And he was like, go back in there. You've got customers. So I think he was already delegating
yeah.
And he does, he's like, and so they know when we're doing well and how have we done. And so, yes, they have an understanding of what's involved and what's involved also on the people side, that sort of that when you make something and you run a business, it's about people. And it's the highs and lows of that.
I find it fascinating that my wife and I are regularly having conversation about work and what's working and what's not, and the team, and then just randomly you're driving in the car and the kids start to ask you questions about it and regurgitate, and you're like, oh my goodness, and actually a lot of that was quite confidential at the time. We're still working on a solution.
Be careful there.
And you think, oh my goodness, they all know each other at school, and it's going to get out, and you forget. But so which was the first chocolate house that opened then?
So the first one was Winchester.
Okay.
And that was a really, obviously, another massive learning curve. Life is full of a learning curve. Every day is a school day. And boy, is that phrase so true. And another phrase we worked to, I don't know if you know the Calvin Coolidge quote, US president, and it's quite a long quote, but it's about persistence and determination. And at the very end of it, it is persistence and determination are omnipotent. And boy, is that true as well, because you just got to keep going. It's a marathon. It's definitely not a sprint. So we found this unit, and it was one of the old, that photo, Jessop's, that's it. It was an old Jessop's unit that had been empty for about a year. Council was the landlord. And it was right at the bottom of the high street, sort of beyond the main anchors, if you like, of the sort of the big brands. And it had been empty for a while, and there was a big discussion about whether there was going to be a sort of a new retail shopping centre being built at sort of in behind it. So I don't think other brands wanted to take it because there was a bit of uncertainty. And normally we wouldn't have been able to afford a high street unit, but because it was right at the bottom of the high street and had been empty and the council were desperate, we kind of got a deal, and we got ourselves in there and kind of kitted it out with proper units, no IKEA. And it was our first foray into a proper brand. So we had counters made for us and a kind of proper design on the fascia, and it's an integrated shop and cafe. So you've got the shop at the front and then it rolls into a cafe because it's all one unit, rather than Swanage that's evolved randomly with holes in walls and stairs in the wrong places. So, it looks like a proper unit. And again, we opened the beginning of December.
Sucker for punishment.
Yeah, well, it was classic. We're aiming for October half term. It slipped, it drifted.
All my restaurants have opened pretty much in May when I'm aiming for March.
Yes.
And you go, oh my God, and we're in a tourism town and you just get hit really hard. So I share your pain.
And what was so lovely, again, a serendipity moment, and I was terrified. I'm like, how am I going to recruit people? We're not a known brand. Never done this remotely. Put ads up in the door while we were refitting, ads out online. And this lady walked past the door, saw the sign, emailed me and said, I want to apply for the role of manager. I know you. I come to Swanage on my holidays every year, and I have been since I was 14. And I've been watched you grow every year.
Amazing.
And I know and I know what my favourite chocolates are. And so I said, Libby, I want to interview.
My goodness, what
we
dream scenario.
Sat in a coffee shop for like 3 hours, and she was already managing a coffee shop. And she had just the right skills, and she knew the brand. She was passionate about our brand. And I said, I'm going to break every rule under the sun now. I want to say, please, now. Yeah. I'm not going to wait and talk to the rest of the team. Would you be up for this? And she was. And she was brilliant. And it was just the most wonderful, because it was our first go at a second shop outside. It's not even like local, it's an hour from here in Wareham. So it's sort of localish, but for us to do this was really deeply exciting. And Libby was just brilliant because she already had that product knowledge and that brand knowledge, and was with us until very recently, actually. So she stayed with us all through the early years, which was just fabulous.
Sometimes the universe works well for you, doesn't it?
It did work.
The harder you work, the luckier you get. But sometimes
that was a wonderful little moment of like, thank you. And what was really lovely is when we opened our doors, obviously we'd done a little bit of a pre-tease, but we opened our doors, the number of people that came in that knew us already, that come to Swanage on their holidays. And we had no idea. So the level of knowledge was fab. We started just before Christmas, and it just, again, the roller coaster just took off. And we haven't stopped to breathe. And the cafe there is really popular. It's love it. Just so proud. So that was now 5 years ago.
5 years ago.
5 and a bit years ago.
Since then you've opened.
So then we managed to open Exeter, and they'll be coming up for 3 years this June. And that's on Gandy Street, which is obviously not the Exeter High Street. Yeah, it's too expensive. So we're on Gandy Street, quite a long way down Gandy Street. And that's known in the area for being one of the really good independent streets, and there's quite a lot of indie businesses on it. And again, that unit had been empty for a while, and it's a beautiful unit. It's got a mezzanine level in it. So there's more space for people to sit upstairs, and we can run workshops and events and parties in there as well, which is great. And I've got a fantastic team there too. Found young lady Liv, and she brought, she recruited people, and we've got a really great dynamic team there too, which is, they just got so much energy. And they really, what I love as well is whenever we've opened, or wherever we've opened, then we were opened in Horsham, and that's coming up for its first birthday next April. And you may say, Horsham? And yes, it's a little bit further east than I think we were envisaging originally, but we've just kept our eyes out for units that might fit our brief. And our brief is quite rigorous because we don't have a big budget. And we need to be in the right sort of demographic. It can't be too far away for the chocolate van. And ideally it has aircon in it because we need to keep the shops cool in the summer. We don't really want it to be south facing if at all possible, because you don't want bright sunlight on all your chocolate stock. So, there's quite a long list of requirements. So we've kept our eyes peeled, and this unit came up, and we didn't think we'd get it, but we did. And it's on the Carfax, so it's on the sort of the town square, which is great. And it's quite a different unit to the Winchester one, which is long and thin, and Exeter, which are long and thin, and this one's sort of wide and thin. So it's a very different shape. So it's quite good to practice on different layouts.
Do you have somebody that's looking for those for you? Because presumably...
Well, Andy is the main man, and he does have a chap who helps us with that, who's sort of in the commercial property thing. Yeah, and he's so he keeps his ears to the ground, whatever the right phrase is. Yeah. But yeah, that's Andy goes out and does days out in the car, kind of.
And that side of the business, you're then on the coalface, you're making coffee, has been quite different. Any key learnings from that compared to the chocolate? You're presumably pleased you've done it because you're still opening more.
Yeah, so. But it's pretty unusual. There aren't that many retail units, if you like, that are both a shop and a cafe in one.
True.
So you've got two different disciplines going on, and so your team have a lot more information to learn and absorb, because you can't just have people who just do cafe or just do shop, because if it's busy in one, then you don't want to have somebody standing there not doing anything. Yep. So it does mean that when we're looking for people that are really up for, they're interested, they've got to be interested and excited about it, because this isn't just handing over something and taking the money. We've got to talk to people. So you've got to help them. And over the years, the number of questions you get on diet or lifestyle choices just ramps up each year. So our team need to understand what they're selling. And there's a lot, there's a big variety of fresh chocolates in the cabinet. And then there's now walls of bars and slabs and studded treats and filled things,
Curiosity is key. I think it's a great human trait anyway, curiosity in general. But I think if you're going to work in the independent and closer to the producer sector, you've got to be curious, because everything, you need to know who makes the gin, who makes the cheese,
absolutely.
who makes the chocolates, where does the meat come from? Yeah. And I think it's fascinating. If you're not interested in where your food and drink comes from, there should be something wrong with you, really, because it's stuff we're putting in our bodies. We're putting
our own bodies, absolutely.
It's how we find our energy every day.
Yeah.
Yet still it feels like a niche, but we're the same. All of our team, the key thing you have to have, you just got to be curious. I love it. I'm learning now. I'm learning every day. I'm learning when I keep sneaking one of these chocolates into my mouth every now and again when I think you're not looking, in case you take them away again. I'm constantly learning. Talking of learning, I was doing a little bit of reading last night, getting ready for our chat, and I'd not heard of what's it called with the chocolate? Raisetrade rather than Fairtrade. Yes. So can you just tell me a little bit about that?
So obviously everybody's aware of Fairtrade, but Raisetrade is the next level on. So when folk ask us about our chocolate, I say a lot of our chocolate is beyond Fairtrade. And by that I mean Raisetrade is all about the chocolate being produced from tree to bar or couverture, because that's the sort of the format we work with it in its country of origin. So they're adding the value and creating a finished product in country rather than exporting a commodity product, a raw, dried cocoa bean, for us to add the value in the West. So that's the traditional business model, the traditional trade model. So even with Fairtrade, yes, there's a Fairtrade premium, slightly debatable whether it always makes it down to the farmers, but that's another subject. But the country is still exporting a commodity product, and then we add the value in the West. And with Raisetrade, they're doing that in country. And I was lucky enough to went out to Madagascar in 2016 now. Wow, it's already 3 years ago. To see Chocolaterie Robin. It's a company that we work a lot with. And they have a factory in Antananarivo, took me a week to be able to say that.
It was very good.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not
It rolls
gonna
off the
repeat
tongue now. Which is the capital of Madagascar. And they are buying beans from cocoa plantations, which are all grown in the Sambarano Valley, which is in the northwest of Madagascar. And some of the plantations they own, others they're buying the beans. And they are then shipping freshly dried beans 15 hours down the road from Sambarano down to the factory. And within a week, they're making chocolate. So this is truly fresh chocolate in the sense that we are fresh in the way we work with the fresh ingredients. And that's taking fresh at the other end of the scale, because normally with the normal business model, the beans then are dried, put into sacks, put on ships, and they then spend several months coming to the West, then sit in warehouses before they're turned into chocolate. So quite often chocolate is made with beans that could be 6 to 9 to 12 months old. So it actually does give you quite a different flavour note. But Raisetrade chocolate then, so these guys, and they showed us around their factory, and they are so proud. There's like 120 people working there that potentially wouldn't have jobs if the process finished at the farmers putting the dried beans into a sack and shipping it. And they are producing chocolate, so it's skills, improves the skills of local labour, improves the tax revenues for the country, and it basically helps build the economy way more than exporting Fairtrade.
It makes a lot of sense, but I don't hear of it as much anywhere near as much as
and
Fairtrade.
it is
So
a kind of
growing?
it's a kind of new phrase, if you like, which has been applied to this company in Madagascar. But then we work with chocolate from Colombia that's produced in Colombia. It's the same principle. Chocolate from Grenada, and the Grenada Chocolate Company is pretty famous actually. Mott, who set that up as a cooperative, was actually in the press, was on Radio 4, he was on TV as well, very visionary man, and he kind of really drove awareness of this whole concept of producing chocolate in country of origin. And the Grenada Chocolate Company chocolate, there's no Fairtrade logo. And that's the thing, with a lot of these chocolates, there's no Fairtrade logo on it because it's beyond that. And if folk are just looking for badges, it's like, ask a bit more, turn the bar around, read the blurb on the back, ask the staff member, because we can sort of talk you through. There's a bigger world. Don't just stop at the logos, which sadly can be abused and whatever by the big industrial companies.
You can often buy a logo if you've got enough cash and know how to fill the form in.
Yes,
sometimes
it happens.
We get asked a lot about why our coffee, sometimes angrily, why is your coffee not fair trade? And you're like, okay, have you got 5 or 10 minutes? I'll happily explain how it works. Now it comes something that our coffee is well beyond fair trade, and fair trade is brilliant. It's great, but it should be a minimum. We should never drop below that, but we can always do better. Let's go way better than fair trade. And you see people kind of like, and it's not because some people are just a little bit angry in the way they ask the question, but as you explain it, they're like, oh great, you really do understand it. But you're right, the label is often a lazy approach. I was having the same chat with Helen Browning from the Soil Association last week around organic, and sometimes the accreditation process for organic can actually stop people who, especially on the smaller scale farms,
absolutely,
who are absolutely following that approach. But the accreditation process is potentially too expensive or too challenging, and it's a tricky one because the accreditation does give people the confidence and it can fast track their kind of understanding. But yes, you're right. Ask the questions, learn more about it. It comes back to that thing of being curious. So you've created this great brand. Your chocolates are incredible. I'm getting to enjoy them. You've now started opening shops. So if you're going to do more of those, but do you feel overwhelmed? Because I remember meeting you 10, 11 years ago when my team came and we just learned in your lovely little Swanage shop to make some chocolate.
Yeah.
Neither of us, I didn't know what my trajectory was going to be, and you didn't know yours. And here we are 11, 12 years later and we've created these monsters. Do you feel overwhelmed? Are you still buzzing from the journey? How do you manage that? How do you kind of, keep it in perspective?
Yeah, there are days when I get overwhelmed, I'll be honest. And there are times when I have to take a deep breath and go, it's okay, it will work. And I think living in Swanage helps because, you just stop and you look at the sea. And you go, this is what, we started here. Swanage is where it's all anchored. This is the sort of this was the kind of I'm trying to find the right word. The catalyst, if you like, the final catalyst was, we've got a family. Our kids love living here. We've got a great team. They love what they do. We did a word cloud session recently with all our teams. So the team here in Wareham and then all the teams in the chocolate houses. And I asked them a series of questions and asked them to put words to describe the different aspects of the business. And some of the words that came out when we're talking about the people in the team was, we love what we do. We're family. We have fun. We're kind. And I thought, if that's how you guys feel, that's great, because then hopefully you're communicating that to our customers. And if our customers give us good feedback, if I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed, I then will just remind myself of what we get from customers, and that I'll go into a chocolate house and I can see it's buzzing, customers are smiling, and kids, we appeal to everyone. Folks say, who is your target audience? I say, anybody who loves fine chocolate and appreciates good food, and quite regularly you go into one of our chocolate houses and you'll have mums and babies and families with school-age kids and granny and grandpa with school-age kids. They're on, children duty, grandchildren duty, and ladies want lunch, and groups of teenagers or groups of students. And I think, and retired couples, and I think happy days, because we're managing to give them all something that resonates, that's giving them a bit of joy, a bit of cheer me up time, a bit of quality time. And success for me is noise. So going into a chocolate house and it's buzzing, and I'm like, brilliant, because it means people are talking to each other, and they're not just on their phones, and they're not just sitting on their laptops working. And if I can have a family group and you've got grunty teenagers who don't normally communicate sat chatting to parents over a chocolate fondue or ice cream or gelato or hot chocolate, and they're having some quality time, and I know that they're eating really and drinking really good quality hot chocolate and really good fabulous quality fondue, then I'm like, yes, we've given them a proper experience that's based in something that has meaning, not a fake thing that's full of sugar and rubbish. Then I feel like, yes, we're making a difference.
That's a perfect answer, because I think too often as the business grows, you end up being buried in HR or in finance or in strategy and all this kind of stuff. And I'm the same. But you walk into a venue, and a venue is about how they feel more than anything. It's you feel the energy. If it's right. You can feel the ambience, and it's great to hear you talk as that, because all too often, the producers or the farmers, or there's a disconnect between what's happening with the production of what's going of the actual ingredients, and then the actual selling of it at the coalface. And clearly, the reasons your chocolate houses will be successful is because you get both. You get the ingredients, you're completely authentic in what you produce, but you actually get that end thing, and it probably comes down to you with your mum going into somewhere in Belgium, and that feeling of being in the chocolate shop more than the taste and the process. Is how you feel and the memories you create, and that's hospitality. Hospitality is about creating time for humans to spend time with each other, and it's such an exciting thing.
But it's also a very traditional thing.
Thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah, and it's I kind of say we're quite an old-fashioned brand in that sense, in that what we're giving people is real time. It's a real experience. And we've had the debates of, do we actually have Wi-Fi free days? Or is it actually just about come to Chococo and, start the conversation at Chococo? Because chocolate is the vehicle to get people to chat.
Drinking wine, whatever it is, it's that shared experience, the conversation around it.
And we can do that with kids. And I'm always just thrilled when you can see a slightly frazzled dad on Saturday. You've got the kids' duty, and he comes in and he's got kind of young kids who are getting a bit overexcited and a bit hyper. And we have colouring, we have paper and colouring crayons, and you just say, colouring idea, and you just see the look of hallelujah. So dad can have his coffee
and a hot chocolate
in peace.
And then, my daughter would be super happy.
Kids then are happy, and they're engaged, and they're drawing pictures, and they've got their mini hot chocolate there, and you just think happy days, simple pleasures.
Amazing.
But executed hopefully
and
well.
Know that hopefully the next generation, that son or daughter is going to remember those times that they went with
their
dad to the local
we hear that in
house.
Swanage. I quite regularly hear sort of, young adults sort of coming in, bringing girlfriends or boyfriends, and they'll talk about how they used to come in as kids. And I'm just thinking, Or then local, some of our regulars will come in with friends. And so they bring friends in as part of, they're coming down to see them and spend, because obviously Swanage being popular as a holiday destination, lots of people have friends who want to come and visit. Or also makes me chuckle is if there's a new customer looking at the counter, and then a regular will say, now, my favourite is that one, or I love the Arbequina and sea salt. Oh, actually, no, don't have the honeycomb. No, you must have the Dorset sea salt, or whatever, And they're doing the job for me. And I'm like, okay, as you were, which is just fabulous.
And to see the multi-generations. My wife was telling me this morning that somebody knocked on the door last night, and she was feeling older, but it was a 20-year-old girl, I think, and she just said she was really articulate. She was actually raising money for a charity, and they got chatting and stuff like that. And we don't live too far from the restaurant on the beach. And somehow it came up in conversation that we owned the restaurant on the beach, and the girl said, "Oh, I've been going. I remember my parents took me there. We used to come down on holiday, and they took me there as a child." And my wife said, "Hang on, I'm having this conversation with a very articulate adult. What do you mean you went there as a child?" And she was like, "Gosh, 11 years. You were 9. Yeah. You were like 8 or 9 years old when you were going."
That happens to me now all the time.
Terrifying, but lovely that their memory of the town is something that we've had the kind of the opportunity to create. And I think that's what entrepreneurs do. We create things that didn't previously exist, and they may have done in different incarnations, but every individual thing you create is different and feels different to a different person. We're getting very short on time, but I want to ask you, particularly I think as a successful kind of entrepreneurial woman in business, I'm sure a lot of people come and ask you for advice, and or give advice. And is there anything in particular that you hear business advice where you think, my God, that's actually rubbish? That's either academic or it's what you get told at university. And my experience in living it is either that's a really poor bit of advice and ignore it, or the flip side, is there anything where you go, you know what, that's the nugget, that's the really good one, or maybe both?
I think there's an element of, there's a sort of and I don't know how prevalent it is now, but this sense of, the first few years will be hard, then it gets easier. Yeah. It never gets any easier. You are as involved and as passionate, but as busy 16 years later than when we started. And I am as running around like a mad thing. And part of that will probably be that I probably need to delegate even more, but you're on different things. So as it grows, it evolves. So what you start off working on, you then might not be doing, but then new projects come along and then new challenges. And so you don't ever stop. So this sense of, it'll get easier, you can put your feet up. Some customers come into our Swanage chocolate house and I say, "Oh, Claire and Andy still around, or are they on their yacht?" And of course the team just roar with laughter and go, "Well, no, they're working as hard, if not harder, than everybody else. They're still now." So that I think is a complete fallacy. And as a woman, for me, it is, as I mentioned earlier, make sure you've got a support network. And if you're a mum, be honest with yourself. And I have talked to some business owners, and one of them was actually a chocolatier, and she said, "Do I grow?" And I said, "Right, stop. Does your business give you joy now? Does it work financially for you now? Do you need to, does it need to grow? Are you at a life stage where you have the energy to cope with that growth? And then what comes with it? Because as you grow, you employ more people, and as you employ more people, then the bogged down nature of life increases. And people, obviously, some will be fantastic, others won't work out, people move on, of course they do, and you're in a constant state of flux. And that's exhausting. So I'm always very much, have you got the energy? Be really honest with yourself. Have I got the energy to keep going? Because I said it's a marathon, not a sprint. And anybody who thinks it can do in food and drink thinks it's a quick win. Sorry, because we make by hand, but we try to be consistent. And on the cafe side, we're always being pulled up. Are our coffees as consistent in each location as they should be? Are the hot chocolates as consistent? Do they get the same consistency every time? Well, we're not a factory. That's the machines, they're proper espresso machines, so is the training. And so you're always training, refresher training. I'm off this afternoon to the Swanage team to do a chocolate refresher. It never stops. It is relentless. And we're now open 7 days a week. And you just have to dig deep. And I think people can be a little rose-tinted spectacles, especially with chocolate. I think there's an element of, how lovely. Oh, I'd love to make some chocolates. And, I just make a few, put them in a box. How difficult can it be? And if you really, truly, passionately care about what you make, it isn't easy. If you want to just buy bought-in ingredients and bought-in shells and ready-made fillings that are full of additives and preservatives, fill your boots. But that's not what we're about. And if you want to do something with integrity, you have to be prepared to give it time. And if you want to make something by hand, you have to be prepared for handmade means people. And people are joyful and stressful.
We're all different, aren't we? You don't get any consistency with people. You might moan your espresso's not consistent, but hey, how about the human being who's making it, and what time they got up, and when they went to bed, and what's going on in their relationship, and are they concentrating? So
absolutely.
The world of hospitality, I love it. I love it because it's about human beings and it's about time. But my goodness, it's challenging because of that human factor. Yeah. So, people will be they'll have arrived to work about half an hour ago, probably, Claire, or they'll have finished walking their dog, or they're going, "Oh my God, this podcast needs to finish." I could talk to you for another hour at least, and I'll come back because just about the ingredients that go in and the actual process of making chocolate. But that's a great, kind of overview. Congratulations for the last decade since I've seen you for what you've done. It's brilliant. You've reignited my passion for your chocolate. So with Easter coming and I've just, having the tour around and seeing all of the Easter eggs you're producing, without a doubt, I'm going to be going home and saying to my wife, you are not buying any of those big industrial
don't do that.
packed Easter eggs this year. And I think people are getting into that kind of, less rather than more. So let's not get the kids, their 7 favourite ones and then give it to everyone.
Yep.
Just buy a couple, buy quality, buy well and invest. So where can people go to buy your Easter products and to learn more about you?
So obviously on our website, which is chococo.co.uk. We're on Instagram, Chococo Chocolates, Twitter, Chococo Chocolates, and on Facebook, which is Twitter is Chococo Tweet, what am I talking about? And Facebook, which is Chococo Chocolates. And then each of our chocolate houses has their own Facebook page as well. So there's Winchester, Chococo, and Exeter and Horsham. And then obviously some of our eggs are in some of the London retailers, but not all. And we haven't even mentioned, the fact that we can look after vegans because dark chocolate is naturally vegan. So we have a whole plethora of products that are vegan friendly and also including a brand new vegan milk from the guys in Madagascar using local Malagasy cashews. So, which is very exciting. So on the Easter side, have a look at our website, have a look at our social feeds and pop in, come and see us. We're open 7 days a week. So come and see us in Swanage. If you haven't been to Swanage, why not? Is what I say. We have a fabulous beach. We have loads of fabulous fish and chip shops and restaurants, and obviously us for your post walk or your post beach walk, hot chocolate and cake.
Perfect. I will put all of the links in the show notes on the website as well. So humansofhospitality.co.uk. I'll make sure that it's on there. And we're also coming into spring, and I know you've just launched into gelato, and we haven't got time to talk about it, but we'll make sure that people can see that as well and come down and not only enjoy the chocolate, but enjoy the I'm going to say the word ice cream, and you're going to tell me
no, gelato. It's different
for the summer. So Claire, thanks so much for sparing the time. It's been a real pleasure to see you, and we'll catch up again soon.
Brilliant.
So there you have it. You have reached the end of another episode of the Humans of Hospitality podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Please go and visit our website, humansofhospitality.co.uk, for the show notes and extra episodes and information. And whilst you're there, don't forget to sign up for our newsletter and to receive free materials all about the humans behind our incredible industry. Lastly, if you could subscribe, rate and review this podcast, you will be massively helping me out, and it would be hugely appreciated. Thank you so much. We'll be launching another podcast in just 7 days' time. Cheers.